All right, yo. So I've got a good one to start us off this week. I was hunting earlier this week on a program without giving too much details away, and they had a hash that they would append to every single request, and that hash was some secret plus the query parameters for that request. And if you didn't have that hash there, then the request wouldn't work. And I had never seen that before. Have you ever seen that before?
No, that's really interesting. A hash plus the query parameters. Like I'll just append it together.
So essentially what they do is they generate the request, right? And then they would take a hash of the path and query parameters, and then they would append that hash to the request. And when the request came through, they would grab that hash, remove it, and then hash the path and the query parameters plus some secret. And then if it didn't match, then it would drop the request.
Interesting.
It's pretty, like, dude, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I came up against that and I was like, okay, this is some, like, duct tape together security mechanism that someone came up with, but it was actually pretty freaking good. So I found a way around it. Full disclosure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I did, and I want to see what your thoughts are. How would you approach that off the top of your head?
So I think first thing I would probably do is I would just like try some basic like ways of joining those parameters together and see if it's like a known hashing algorithm. So like try like spaces, dashes, vertical bars, just like nothing between them, and then I would try like MD5 SHA-1 SHA.
Well, it was a SHA-256 hash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe what you could do as just a basic test is put some like super simple controllable strings in the query. Get the hash, run it into a hash brute forcer or a hash cracker, because if you use something simple enough, it'll probably actually be in the hash cracker database, and then you can see how it's joining it together.
Well, it's not like, oh, you mean you try to get the parameter to be you try to get it to be as simple as possible?
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, so obviously we don't have or without going down the spoiler path, there's no way to generate that hash with your arbitrary supplied user input. So it was a little tricky, man. I'm not gonna lie. One of the things that came up off the top of my head was like, okay, how is this hash generated? So I grabbed the query parameters in the path and I started fuzzing around with it. Interestingly enough, they didn't hash the post request bodies. So it was just the get request query parameters. So I started fuzzing around with that. I couldn't find anything. And then the solution that I came up with in the end is, I don't know, man. I thought it was pretty cool. But essentially how it works is when you log in, there's a return to URL, right? And that return to URL is supplied by user input. So when you log in, you can generate that hash, or you can stick your path in there with your query parameters and then press, put in your credentials and log in, and then it will generate that actual hash and attach it to the thing. Then that hash can be transposable into other people's accounts, and you could, issue arbitrary requests that way. So I thought that was a pretty interesting one.
Nice. So you found like a generator endpoint that you could feed it input and then get it to hash for you.
Exactly.
Nice.
But besides that, I mean, to be perfectly honest, man, I had me stumped for a couple hours. I was like, this is actually a pretty decent technique to annoy hackers.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those things that you just put it on your list of like, take note. That's interesting. Maybe it'll pop up later, and then you just keep hunting, and like it's super not like dissatisfying, whatever. It's very like frustrating when you like you're so close on something and you just have to push away from it and go do something else and move on to the next thing. But I think that's also those great things to just like put a pin in it, put a sticky note on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one of the skills that's definitely necessary in this space because, if you can't always exploit something right off the bat. So keeping that Rolodex, I don't know, that's not exactly what it is. It's keeping those notes in your head of like, okay, well, if I go here, I've got this chain piece, can really end up with some crazy bugs. And it's funny you mentioned that, Joel, because we've got some crazy chains we're going to talk about later in this episode. But yeah, no, it was just an interesting little tidbit I wanted to drop in there. And then the other piece of that target that I'll just mention was, I noticed that they in almost all of the requests, the IDs of the affected asset was in the get request query parameters, not the post body, right? And so even though it was a post request, it was getting sent in the query parameters. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Their security best practice is like, putting the IDs, the numeric IDs, in the query parameter. So what I did is I started hunting around and I started looking for any time a numeric ID would pop up in the post body, and I got a couple cool bugs out of that. So that's a cool little bounty story from this week.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really enjoy. Recently, I've been sitting down and doing one of the HackerOne pen tests, and it's fun to dive back in, and especially, I mean, at least in the U.S., most people had Monday off for President's Day, so that nice 3-day weekend is good. And I was just spending a bunch of time just like hacking around, like poking at stuff.
Hacking around like it's a verb.
Hacking around, yeah, as you do, just
hacking around the yard,
Yeah, it was just me in the yard with a machete.
Sure you were hacking, Joel. You're out there with a machete. Oh,
yeah,
man.
but it's really fun because you start to build out like this web of sort of knowledge about your target, and you start to piece things together and build out some really interesting like internal like models in your head. And you can really find some cool connections once you start to get a real full understanding.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I pretty much, this is the first target that I've actually, selected and gone up against since H1 407, the last live hacking event. I needed a little bit of a break after that one. And then also we had we got a new rental property actually within the past couple of weeks. So I've been over there like actually hacking stuff and trying to get that to be in place. So yeah, it's been pretty fun.
Nice.
I do have, this week I've got a couple guys coming to hang out with me from Japan. They're staying at my place, friends from when I lived over there, and they're both aspiring bug bounty hunters. So we're gonna pick some target and hit it hard over the next 3 weeks, and hopefully I'll have some good war stories from that.
Dude, it's super funny because I was commenting recently that it seemed like everybody that I knew and everybody that I was seeing on social media was all traveling to Japan now in the last like month or two, because they opened up their travel restrictions again. But maybe it's the other way around, where if you're in Japan, everybody's now going to America.
Run! Yeah, no, it was. I was jealous, man. I was getting some. I know what you mean. I know who you're talking about. A couple different groups of people actually, and I was getting pictures of ramen and katsu and like katsudon. So good. So,
yeah, I'm super jealous. Me and my fiance, soon to be wife, we're trying to get out there. Like, we want to do it for our honeymoon, we think. So we're just like we're trying to like plan out the perfect trip so that we can go and visit, because neither of us have ever been. We both really wanted to go for a while.
Yeah, it's super good, man. Definitely let me know when you're hopping over there. Got some cool recommendations, and just right now in March is like the peak season to go. And so it's a little expensive on the flights right now, but so I got to go do some United hacking and get some more miles, and then go and hop over to Japan.
Yeah. There's a little pro tip for you. For those who don't know, if you hack on United's bug bounty program, they pay you in miles. Yeah. So a critical bug is worth what, 1 million miles?
Yeah,
is that still?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy. It's kind of hard to get a crit with the way that they assess the bugs, but definitely been able to rack up some miles there. Haven't paid for a flight in a while, so definitely check it out. And the gotcha though on that, I will say,
the taxes
is the taxes.
Yeah.
But cool tip on that. You heard it first here. I talked to actually my father-in-law, and I was just like, what do you think I should do about this tax predicament? He's a pretty clever guy with those sort of things. He's like, well, if they're taxing them for you, why don't you just write them off? And just if you're using it for business purposes, if you're going to like DEF CON, or you're doing, going out to San Francisco to meet with your buddies for, some hacking thing, or, doing some that oriented travel. For example, Mariah comes with me to all the live hacking events, so we always fly her out. If you use your miles for that, then you can just write them off on your tax return, and it's just, plus and minus, so works well.
I did not know that you could expense flights paid with miles. Today I learned.
Yeah, so
obviously
cool,
this is not a
stuff.
financial advice podcast.
Yes,
and
let's go ahead
anything we
and
say we are not held liable for. So
insert disclaimer here.
Do this at your own risk. But there's a little hack for you that may or may not work.
Yeah, no responsibility here. Just free me of all responsibility.
Just
All right.
sign your name here.
Yeah. All right, dude. So, yeah, we've got two different types of bugs we want to talk about this week, and then we'll kind of go into some bug write-ups. We got a CSS injection. That's the one we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about some post-message stuff. So, you want to talk about post-message stuff first, or should I do CSS injection?
Yeah, sure. And I'll actually tie this in with my bug because my bug that I was going to talk about was a post message bug. So very
Nice, sweet.
straightforward post message bug. Basically, there was this HTML page that I found that was doing some really interesting behavior. I think I had found it using Franz's post message extension that we talked about.
Okay.
And essentially what I noticed is that it was sending this HTML content over to the iframe for it to render on this page
Nice.
with a post message. So normally you probably wouldn't see this, but when it's printed out in the console like that, it's super straightforward.
Yeah.
So yeah, essentially all you do is you just iframe that HTML, you send a post message with your script to that page, and bam, just pops an XSS, and it was just super easy.
Dang, that's pretty clean, dude.
Yeah, it was actually an internal dupe on the program.
Oh, no,
so
dude,
so they
that's
were like
so,
they were like, yeah, we have a ticket for this already. We know about this behavior, but
Sure you do.
yeah.
I don't know. I
yeah.
feel like that is one area where the bug bounty platforms are lacking a little bit right now with the internal dupe thing. Like, I would love to see, and I've seen some companies do this well, where they actually like take a picture of the Jira ticket with the date created and stuff like that. But sometimes it just feels bad.
Yeah. The company that I work at, which I'm not gonna mention them because,
Sure.
well, you can do the research, but yeah, we'd like to do that as well, just because
Nice.
a lot of us are bug bounty hunters or were bug bounty hunters in the
Yeah.
past, and so we have a lot of the context of like how to like message with researchers and how to sort of keep rapport and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely like to share as much data and be as transparent as possible whenever we can.
Yeah, you got a great team over there, dude. Definitely worth hacking on that program.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
So-
do you want to talk more about post message stuff? Yeah.
yeah, real quick. So, yeah, so generally, for those who aren't familiar, post message is basically just a way for you to communicate between between window instances. So it lets you send messages to different instances, and you can receive messages on those instances with an on message. And there's a great Medium post by Daniel Brain from back in 2017. We'll link this in the show notes. But basically, this has a full list of, and I think this is probably up to date. It's 6 years old now, I think. But
yeah, I think it is. I went through and tested a lot of these lately, and it's pretty on par, I think.
yeah, so basically it's just like a great reference where it walks you through all of the different ways that you can get a window object within JavaScript, essentially. So whether it's an existing pop-up window or a new pop-up window, or it's your current window, you can get them by name, you can get them by object, you can iterate over all of the different frames within a window. There's like a ton of different ways that are detailed throughout this blog post. So I would definitely recommend you go check that out if you're ever dealing with stuff that uses post message, and if you're using that Chrome extension that we mentioned, you'll probably notice a lot of stuff uses post message. So much stuff uses post message. It's
and
honestly
a lot of extensions too. The Chrome extensions. I've got to disable a bunch of Chrome extensions every single time I try to use it.
I know, because I'll be like just like regularly browsing, and then I'll just see like something pop up, and I'll be like, wait, what is that coming? And it's just a Chrome extension. It's just MetaMask or something.
Well, it is pretty cool that it does see the post messages from Chrome extensions though, because that would be really helpful for auditing Chrome extensions as well.
100%. Yeah. So check out that Medium post. It's got a lot of really good references in it. I would go through them all, but I would just be reading a list, I think. So it's I'll leave that up to the listener to go ahead and read that. But yeah, post messages are super, they go under the radar super easily. A lot of people forget about them. A lot of people don't notice them. So install that Chrome extension. Check out what messages are being sent in your post message, and find some bugs.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's definitely some cool stuff in there. And then once you get, using that, once you get a reference to the window object, you can send the post message and interact with them. And it's pretty much like, the way that I like to think about it is it's kind of like an API for the client-side web page. So if you've got event listeners on there, those are like the endpoints that you can call. So if you think about it that way, it makes it a lot more approachable. You just got to learn how to use the window, dot PostMessage interface to send your data across.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really excited because I noticed in the doc you put CSS injection stuff, and we had talked about this a couple
Yeah.
episodes ago. I mentioned that I wanted to dive into this, so I'll let you take it away. But yeah, CSS injection.
Dude, I'm excited for this, man. This is like I mentioned on the other episode, it's like one of my most favorite bugs that I've ever found. Before I jump right into that, I will actually talk about a couple little things that I wanted to mention. So while I was researching for this bug, when I was actually finding the bug, I found about a bunch of cool things about CSS, including the fact that you can do CSS escapes. So a lot of times where you have a specific CSS you can inject into a page intentionally on an application, they'll use like regex or something similar to validate that the CSS you're sending is appropriate. But in these sort of situations, if they use a blacklist instead of a whitelist, you can do some pretty crazy stuff because there's like 3 or 4 different ways you can escape Unicode and like write the same thing. And so a lot of times those aren't taken into consideration when, blacklisting CSS. So definitely something to check out.
So when you write CSS, can you do like HTML encoding on it, or?
Not exactly. So I'll drop it in the doc. You can see it there. But there's a couple different ways. One of them is like Unicode. So first of all, you can do just simply backslash encoding. So if you just say like \M, that's the character M. And so if you just throw a backslash in there, sometimes that can screw up the regex and get a bypass for you. And you'll see that's what actually happens in my case.
And I love seeing blog posts like this because it's pretty. I feel like it's rare when you see somebody just like openly like writing like a fully formatted blog post that's just talking about like nuances about things.
No,
like it's
I
so
love
great
that.
to have like that kind of perspective.
Yeah, for sure. What is this guy's name so we can shout him out? It's
Matthias.
Yeah.
Matthias.
Binance.
Oh god.
Let's see if I can get to his Twitter here. Hold on.
I'm just gonna.
Matthias
His
Binance.
thing says his name is Matthias. I work on the Chrome DevTools and V8 JavaScript engine at Google. Holy cow. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. And actually, look at that. He's actually got @Matthias on Twitter. So
Wow.
that's how you know you're an OG if you have @ your name on Twitter.
That's pretty based.
So definitely go check that guy out. He wrote this blog post, CSS escapes, CSS character escape sequences, that has a bunch of ways to escape stuff. And then the other way to do it is you can do just Unicode-based escaping. So the Unicode code, for example, the Unicode character for 1 is 0031. So you just kind of put that in there, \00031, and that escapes to your Unicode character.
Yeah, this is really awesome, and he actually wrote at the bottom that there's an update that there is now a CSS.escape utility method that that handles like all these different rules and stuff for you. It's interesting because I think this was actually written as like a reference for like developers to try and be more safe and like what the rules they need to follow for validation, and per usual we're kind of approaching it the backwards way. We're looking at how to
abusing your work, Matthias, but we're big fans. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, dang, dude, that's awesome. Those people are wizards in my book. Like anybody who works on like the low level, like all that kind of stuff, total wizard.
It's crazy. So the next thing that I had here on the doc for CSS injection was talking about a technique developed by good old Nathaniel Latimer, Donut.
None other than Donut, the Rust master himself.
Yeah. So if you check out his blog post, we'll also link it in the description area. But he sort of developed this technique. I want to say, or at least this is the first time I saw it. I won't say he developed it, but of this sort of recursive CSS chaining. So if you have a CSS injection, you perform an import, and that import triggers something and performs another import, and that CSS triggers like a font load and then triggers another import. And it allows you to really, really quickly, almost instantaneously extract a value.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's a pretty cool technique as well that I wanted to shout out. And we can't really mention CSS injection without having that noted. So.
Yeah. I think that's the bug that I was thinking of. I think
it
was from Singapore, and or maybe it was like around that time. But yeah, that was just a really awesome bug because it's one of those things where like normally I think you would get to that point and you'd be like, oh well, this is unexploitable. This is probably where this bug ends, and I'll just have to follow something else. But
yeah, you can't say the words unexploitable around Donut. Like that just like triggers him to like go down that path.
yeah, challenge accepted.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about before I hop right into the CSS injection bug is the CSS painting API. And I'm sure people more CSS adept than me have already checked this out. But this is actually a way that is supported by Google Chrome, like not even any flags or anything, just in prod Google Chrome, to actually call JavaScript from CSS. And so I don't think this is behind any developer flags or anything, but there's just a very limited amount of stuff you can do here. So I'd be interested for someone who's a little bit more adept than me in browser exploitation to check this out and see exactly how they're doing it, because there definitely is some potential here.
Yeah, this is super interesting. I wonder how limited it is in terms of like the scope and functions that it can actually call, because they mentioned that this is meant for drawing, like I guess similar to a canvas or something. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think you have to like trigger you have to load up a JavaScript worklet. You have to register it in JavaScript, and then you can call it from within the CSS, but there has to be some parsing of what they're doing. And so I definitely want to dive a little bit deeper back into this because it seems like an interesting target. And anyone in the audience, if you figure out something cool with that, please send it to me. We want to feature it, and also I just want to know about it. So
yeah, this is super cool. Before you talk about your CSS injection bug, you want to talk about Rezo's blog post?
Oh yeah, sure. I just wanted to shout this out really quick because right before the episode he released this, and Rezo, let's see if I can call out his Twitter handle, Rezo__. He released a blog post called Hacking with ChatGPT, and it just kind of talks about all the different like quick and dirty use cases that you can use ChatGPT for while you're hacking. And I think it does a really good job of giving like actual hands-on, like this is not something that's potentially possible with ChatGPT. This is something that you can literally go to ChatGPT right now and do, and it will benefit your hacking. And I've definitely used ChatGPT for these sort of things before, so I thought it was an awesome blog post.
Yeah, so and this is stuff we talked about. I don't remember which episode this was, but one of the earlier episodes we talked a little bit about ChatGPT and use cases for hacking and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, like we mentioned, take this all with a little bit of a grain of salt because ChatGPT sometimes hallucinates.
Yeah, it does.
Where it will like start to just make up stuff that makes sense but doesn't make sense. But that being said, it is really, really useful for a lot of like quick and dirty things, especially like the scripting stuff. It was interesting. I was reading through this prompt that Rezo had put together that was describing, write a Python script that takes this input and reads a file, blah, blah, blah. And for me, sometimes at this point, after all the years that I've written Python, it's probably quicker for me to just write the Python than it is to try and explain what I want it to do.
It does take some time for it to process it sometimes too. I don't know if it's just the load or they're having some trouble scaling or something, but it does take a second.
Yeah, the free, I don't know what's going on with the free version. I think the last I heard was that the free version is only free when it's under low load.
Oh, really? Oh, geez.
Or something like that. But or maybe they're planning on adding a paid version soon. There's something like that, but I believe at a certain point you're going to start to have to pay for credits.
Yeah, I can't find the tweet, but someone tweeted at us after that episode. I want to say it was episode 6, where we were talking a little bit about ChatGPT stuff. And then he said something on the lines of like, after listening to this episode, here is a really cool link to like understand how ChatGPT works, and it might be helpful for thinking about this from like an attacker's perspective to understand, the background behind it. So I'll try to dig up that tweet and retweet it and add it to the show notes as well.
Nice. Yeah, send me that tweet. I missed that one.
I will. All right, man. I believe the time has come.
It's CSS injection time. You
CSS
hyped me up about this.
I know. I hope it meets the expectations. But yeah, I had it in my browser tab here, and here it is right here.
I hate it when my tabs close themselves.
Yeah, it closed. And I probably did something. I probably like saw a
No,
hacker
it closed itself. It
notification.
closed itself.
Yeah, that's what it is. All right, cool. So here's the bug. Setting the scene. I'm not going to tell you the target, but it is a target that does something that in a store provides payment processing and other services. And actually, it's funny because I've actually found a similar bug in another target. So these are, anytime you see like a payment flow, this is really something you should look into because payment flows like to do cross-domain communication for PII segmentation, or not PII, what is it called? PCI? Is it the one that they have to do for credit card? For segmentation, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's PCI.
I think it's PCI. And they have to be on a specific domain with a bunch of like specific standards and stuff like that. So you'll often see post or cross-domain communication in those situations for segmentation purposes. And a lot of times that causes problems, but like for us as attackers, because we can't get at the data that's behind the segmentation, but sometimes, as you'll see in just a moment, it causes problems as well. Had to take a sip of water there before we get rolling, but
I know my throat takes a beating during these episodes,
does,
especially
man.
with the allergies now.
Oh yeah, I'm getting smacked by that today too. Okay, so the way that this specific one worked was each individual field in the checkout was an individual iframe, and those iframes were sort of syncing up and like getting communication via sort of a post message broadcast of sorts that would just kind of broadcast all the post messages from every that fit this form to every other entity in that this frame was connected to. Now, the problem with this is the situation where you have a malicious influencer, and that influencer gets you to go to a product purchase page and then does it in a new tab so they have access to that frame reference. And my throat is dying again, so I'm going to take another sip. Yeah. So then, we got these in these different iframes. And what would happen is they would send out these broadcast updates. And once they send out the updates, you have a set of, they also would set up event listeners. And they had a bunch of event listeners that they would subscribe to. And these are, here, let me see if I can pull up the actual list here. Yeah, like you could set attributes, a certain set of attributes, and you could, you would get an alert when the frame was ready and a bunch of other stuff like that. So here's how the attack worked. The attacker would force the victim to open up the tab and go through that process. Then when the frame was loading up the actual credit card input frame, there was a race condition that you could trigger where you could send a post message faster than the actual parent frame to the child's child iframe. And that would allow you to do a CSS injection on the credit card page where all of this was actually happening. So you win the race. That's the first thing. You get the CSS injection. Now, once you get the CSS injection, there is CSS filtering that's happening here. And they've got a blacklist. And that blacklist prevents you from doing imports. It prevents you from doing media or like a bunch of, there's some like caveats for media calls. There's a bunch of stuff. However, I was like, oh, let me just use this escaping that I had researched. I say, oh, it took me like 5 hours to get to this point. But yeah,
let me just do that one thing real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
5 hours later.
Pretty much, that's how it was. And so, yeah, I did that, and then freaking CSP got me, man. I couldn't import any other scripts, even though I bypassed the import restriction. So I was like, shoot. So then I go down this path, and without getting too much into detail, there was a caveat that they were using for media queries, where you could do media queries, and it wasn't filtering for regex. And it wasn't filtering with regex for comments. And man, I'm sorry, guys.
Your poor throat's taking a beating.
I know, my throat is killing me, and I'm not going to go and edit all of these out because it takes too much time. So sorry about your ears. But anyway, within this CSS that I would send, there was a way to abuse the media query caveat and the CSS block comments to actually prove that you could run arbitrary CSS. So I did that, and I defined 160 unique fonts and 16 unique, listen to this, and 16 unique classes, okay? So, and then going back to the post message thing, there were a couple little like functions you could trigger for the post message. You could set the placeholder of the field, and you could set the, and you could clear the field, right? So this is how the actual attack worked, right? I would generate all this CSS, and then the user would go to that page, and they would input a credit card number, right? They would input the number 4, right? So when that happens, it triggers a class which loads an external font that's on my server, okay? Then the parent tab reaches out to my server. It loads up that character that it had submitted to it. All the time, this is a 0 width font, so the user isn't seeing their character typed yet. So it goes out to the server, pulls that down. Then the parent will actually issue a post message to clear the field and set the placeholder to that number value, right? And then it will log that number, and then the process continues. And it does that every single time, so it just looks to the user like they're typing with like maybe like a 10 millisecond lag. Like it was so clean. And then at the very end, it had leaked all of the numbers successively to the server via those font uploads. And the way, for example, to explain the reason why we need a font is in font definitions in CSS, you can set a Unicode range. So a font is only used for one specific Unicode point. And that would allow you to determine which font was loaded. That would allow you to determine which character was actually being typed by the user. So that's how I leaked the full credit card number.
That's wild. Yeah, so you just built like a CSS keylogger. That's
exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was a CSS keylogger. And man, there were like so many other different pieces along this route. Like the 0 width font, I had to like use a SVG font and then convert it to a WAF, and there was 0 width so that the user, when they would type it the first time, they wouldn't see it, and then it disappear and then it reappear. It would like just use a 0 width font originally, and then as soon as I actually placed it in the placeholder, then it would show the character. And it was so clean. Like at the
I'm
very
sure
end,
that didn't become a rabbit hole where you explored how fonts work.
Okay, dude, it was so, it took me so long. I probably had 25 hours in the middle of a live hacking event invested in this actual bug.
Oh,
and
God.
in the end, it popped, and they gave me a crit for it. So I was really, really happy about that. But I think this is the longest report I have ever written, and it got several awards at the end. It got best submission, it got customer obsession, and then researcher with the most valid non-critical submissions. Got also added on there, so it was a big bounty at the end. I was really happy.
That's awesome. I think I know the customer that you're talking about here, but we're not going to say any names.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't say anything.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. Well, before we go, I was actually, you reminded me while you were talking about like payment processors and stuff.
Yeah.
I was thinking there's this I'll leave this as an exercise to one of the listeners if they want to take a look. There's an interesting behavior that I've noticed on a lot of different shopping websites, that if you make a purchase but you don't create an account, then you can later create an account with that email and get access to your orders.
Oh.
Right? So like it's like if you sign up after the fact with your email that already has an order on file, then you can you'll be able to see your previous orders with that email.
Interesting. So if that user, if it has a sign up flow that doesn't require email validation, then you can go through that sign up flow and get access to other people's orders.
Yeah, so that in and of itself might be enough to be a bug,
Yeah.
but I think that it could be taken further, and I'm not exactly sure how or where, but I think it might be an interesting exercise to try and pursue if you notice that behavior somewhere.
Yeah, well, if you had a self-stored XSS, you could, do some stuff with that too, where that user would just, do a password reset next time they logged in and, get in there, start doing stuff, and you can monitor that whole session with a self-stored XSS.
Yeah, or maybe you place some bogus orders that go to their email, and then they go and create an account and they get popped.
Yeah, for sure. Cool stuff, man. Nice
Yeah.
nice attack vector, dude. I love stuff
Yeah.
like that, man. Oh, that just gets the heart beating for hacking stuff.
Yeah,
Very good,
yeah.
man.
Some little fuel, some ideas for your hacking endeavors later.
I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
Let me see. Is there anything else we got on the list for today, or is that it?
I think that was it. It was kind of a quiet week this week.
Yeah, it was a little bit chill, but we'll let him off early. Only
Yeah,
35
we've
minute
been
episode today.
poking people, so we'll have some bigger topics for next week. I think we're gonna maybe pursue. I won't spoil anything.
keep
but
it on the
yeah,
rack.
yeah,
Keep it on
yeah.
the
We got a couple ideas.
All right, sweet. That's the pod.
Awesome. Peace.